Hi everyone, Silver Joker here. I have a special treat for you guys today. You guys are familiar with Bullion Now, very rapidly growing YouTube channel. Matthew, Joe, and Michael over in Melbourne, Australia, they also have a physical bullion store, and they have a very successful online bullion business. And so I asked Matthew, who my understanding is the unofficial tech person down at Bullion Now, to come and sit down and have a conversation with me. I also invited my good friend and business partner, Silver 5150, to ask a few questions. And it was a fascinating interview. Matthew is a very intelligent guy. He knows a lot about both aspects of stacking silver bullion and the numismatic side. So if you're interested to hear what we talked about, stick around. So welcome everybody to the Silver Joker channel. I got my good friend Silver 5150 here. We're going to have a discussion with Matt from Bullion Now. You guys are familiar with his channel. They also have a very successful online bullion dealership or bullion business. So we're going to have a conversation with him. And so Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you, man. So how's the weather down there in the land down under?
Surprisingly good today. So you've come on a great day for it.
That's good. So what do you guys do in Australia where you are? I mean, what is there to do? You guys go to the beach a lot?
Yeah, the beach is pretty popular. I'm not much of a beach guy myself. I prefer staying indoors, looking at my coin collection. But yeah, it's pretty popular. It's a very outdoorsy country, you could say.
All right. So my first question for you, Matt, is, why'd you get into precious metals? I mean, what sparked your curiosity and your interest in precious metals?
Geez, that's a heavily loaded question. That answer could take all day.
Yeah.
I'll give you the abridged version.
Okay.
So I was working in the Philatelic Bureau for Australia Post, which was the stamp department.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I developed an interest in philately and started stamp collecting. And a number of my customers that I would deal with regularly were also stackers. And that led me down the rabbit hole. And I got my first purchase was a tube of Canadian maples, and I hadn't done any research into why it is that people stack or anything like that. I came at it purely from a collector standpoint, and when I saw the designs on the maples, I just completely fell in love with it. And it's really interesting. People often talk about that sense you get when you're holding precious metals, and I can say firsthand that that's what I got. I wasn't buying it as a wealth preservation, but as soon as I had that tube in my hand, you can feel the weight behind it, and it sort of set something off in me, and I was off. And it wasn't until years later that I really started to pick it up in a bit more of a serious capacity. But that's the quick introduction as far as.
Well, that's a great introduction. That's a great answer too. I like that.
Thank you very much.
All right, so how long have you been doing it? How long have you been stacking or into precious metals?
So that first acquisition was probably close to 10 years ago, and it really started to pick up in a bit more of a, I guess you could say, going down the rabbit hole and conducting a bit of my own research and understanding assessing what my motivations were for stacking. That probably took place about 5 years ago. So that was when I was managing a coin shop in Sydney, and a number of clients, I would guess you could say well-heeled clients, fairly wealthy customers, started buying large amounts of gold and silver. And that's when it really started to come up on my radar, and I started to do a lot more research and began stacking a little more seriously with I guess you could say stacking with intent.
Yes, that's a good way to put that. Stacking with intent. I think we all have that motivation. I mean, for me, stacking is absolutely to kind of stave off future inflation and also to deal with any kind of crisis that may arise. So I see it as kind of a saving. So yeah, that is stacking with intent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on my show, when I got started, probably not quite 2 years ago, as the prices started coming within range of almost anyone, we're talking in the 15s, 14s, spot, even down as low as 13 for an instant there in 2019 and 20. I began to try to coin this phrase, volume stacking, saying, guys, you're not going to get another opportunity like this again. $14 an ounce silver today is the $4 an ounce silver, 20, 30 years ago. And you need to try to volume stack whenever you can. Don't damage yourself, don't hurt yourself financially, but understand that this is the time to stack with intent, like you said, Matt, and it'll really make it count. And you can still do that today, but you really got to shop hard to do it.
Yes,
absolutely. I totally
true.
agree. And that's something that I almost fell into. And I think for some people, when you first begin, I almost got swept up in the hype of it all. I almost got that sensation that this will be the only time that I can possibly stack at this price point. I need to push as hard as I possibly can. And I'll admit it that in the first instance, I did strain myself a little financially. But that did serve to give me a solid foundation for the future. And that was sort of my first large acquisition. And from there, I've always used that as my foundation moving forward. But that is advice that I often give to clients, is that starting your foundation is really important and a key part of the journey. But in order to do that, I don't recommend pushing yourself out of your financial comfort zone, because you never want to go to bed nervous about your future in that sense.
Absolutely, and I say the same thing to like new stackers, because a lot of times, from my experience, a lot of the stackers that are no longer stackers or have gotten out of it was for that reason. They didn't plan well enough financially, or they didn't budget well enough financially, and then they wind up selling silver or any precious metals back at a loss because they were in it for the wrong reason, or they didn't think it through well enough. So I would say just what you said, plan it out. If you're going to start, don't overdo it. Start with a foundation, get an idea of how much you want to stack and what you want to spend, and stick to that. And that's the best way to do it. That's good advice.
Which is hard.
All right, man. Well, you work for a company that buy and sell physical bullion. But have you seen a difference in the demand lately? I mean, let's say in the last year or so, have you seen a difference in the type of demand and what the demand is for? Is it for a particular type of bullion there in Australia, or can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, sure. So it would probably be, when I have conversations like these fairly regularly with Michael, the owner. He's just in the office next door, actually. But I've been with the company for, it must be close to a year now. So I suppose I started out as a customer of Bullion Now. And when I joined the company, I think things were growing exponentially at that point in time because the demand was just so high. And you would also see that if you look on the channel, the types of things, some of the things that we do the unboxings for, the scale of that has grown as well as the business over time. And I think that there was just a strong demand across the board, particularly in Australia, for, I guess you could say, like the kind of friendly service. I know it sounds like just a shameless self-plug, but no. I think the way, and I think that has gone a long way to build the business rapidly in a short period of time. So to answer your question, I think across the board, demand has increased, but I suppose that has coincided with the growth of the business. So as the business grows, my perception of it is that the demand is growing, but I suppose that demand theoretically has always existed. We're just now servicing a larger portion of the market. So in turn, my perception is that demand is huge, but it could also be a case of, well, the business is growing. So your perception changes along with that. But I do think that certainly some of the larger buyers, there's some really, really big moves happening, which is very exciting to see. And as a result, it allows us to handle some, 10-kilo gold coins and things like that.
You guys
things that just bend my mind.
Oh my gosh, you guys do some epic unboxings. Very nice.
Would you speculate, we're talking hedge fund level, or just, maybe some big individual players that have extra capital, they want to diversify their portfolio, their retirement?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? So we have what's referred to as, I think I mentioned this to Silver Joker in our last conversation, I think you guys call it a 401k. In Australia, we refer to it as a superannuation fund. So there are a lot of clients that we have that have their own self-managed superannuation funds, which is their retirement fund, and they then control the the finances in there. And so a lot of people then set up an account under their self-managed super fund and make acquisitions that way. So there are some very large clients that come along as a result of that. But we also do service a lot of, I guess you would say, high net worth individuals. So it is a combination of the two. It is predominantly gold from what I've observed. And I think that is probably due to the perception of stability that comes along with that. Whereas silver has historically been a little more volatile in movement and things like that, which is great for a lot of people that are looking at potentially growing their wealth and things like that. Whereas gold has always been perceived as that, safe haven, sort of like a hedge against inflation and all that type of thing. So I think, from what I've observed, a lot of the large acquisitions are predominantly rooted in gold. But we do have some that do go fairly heavy on silver as well, which is always exciting to see.
Yes, well, that's exciting for me. Where do you see silver and, let's say, or any precious metals, put it that way, where do you see the precious metals, gold and silver, in, let's say, a year from now?
It's an excellent question, and one that I think about often. I'm fairly, as you know, I'm fairly involved in the numismatic side of things. So, and I have a deep appreciation for the designs of coins and things like that. That's, to me, where I get a lot of my value. But I understand that a lot of our clients are looking more at the intrinsic value of what it is that they're buying and hoping that will go up in time. So personally, and this is, not financial advice, and
sure, right.
This is me personally speaking, not as the brand over here. So I know there are a lot of predictions out there for explosive growth, and I know that there are a lot of very knowledgeable individuals that are predicting, triple digit silver and things like that, which would be wonderful to see, but it's not something that I predict in the immediate future. I certainly think it's possible, particularly given the way things are going.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna hit you with a market related question, Matt, if you don't mind.
I love it.
All right, so I'll start with this. Okay, so if you watch the markets, anybody watch the markets, they notice and they watch the commodities market like I do, because I don't think commodities are singularities. I think they work, as a unit, because they're all durable goods. They're all, physical assets and physical, investments. While gold and silver continue to track sideways while this is going on. Do you see a time when gold and silver will actually break away from the pack or all the other commodities, for example? Or are they more likely to rise as a tide with all the commodities simultaneously?
That is an excellent question. That was a very well put question as well. I just enjoyed listening to that. I think it's hard. It's difficult to say, right? Because I look at the charts as well and look at where things have gone and try and make sort of correlations and things like that. But I sometimes find that I can get bogged down, and it can sometimes be a little disheartening when I do a lot of research and then the opposite happens. And I think there are a lot of people that have possibly been a little underwhelmed with the movement of things like both gold and silver, particularly with the current climate, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. And I think that what I also bear in mind is that, and for me personally, this is a long-term thing, right? So my expectation that it's going to be like a slow and steady rise. I know that there are people that are speculating, a hockey stick moment for precious metals, and that'd be great. But I think realistically, and for precious metals to do their job, for me personally, it's going to be a lengthy process. It's not going to be like, the like a cryptocurrency exploding overnight. And I think that whilst there's more and more people getting involved, I think that's all fantastic. But I don't foresee, as I mentioned before, an explosion in it, so to speak. But so to answer your question, I think it would be a slow and steady increase, which I think would be warranted given the current state of affairs globally.
That's a very, very, very good answer. I like that a lot. And that's exactly where I see it. And I think that's really the most beneficial way for everyone that stacks or invests, or however you want to put it, in precious metals. Well, last thing for you, Matt, if you would, in the few minutes we got left, if somebody was to come in your shop today, brand new, just wanted to start either investing in silver or gold or, any of the numismatics aspects of your business, what advice would you give them?
So, that's a good question, and it does happen. It does happen. So I would generally, ask a few questions to begin with. So ask them if they've done a little bit of research, if they understand, I guess, what it is that they're doing. Often I have people that come through that have just been recommended by a friend, so they don't actually understand anything about precious metals. So I give them a bit of an overview. I also like to do a bit of a show and tell to bring out some coins, bars, some minted products, as well as some cast things, and explain the difference in production as well as the premium attached to it. So explain that there is a spot price, but there are also other factors at play that determine the price of any given product that we sell. So after giving them a bit of an overview, my main recommendation is to start a foundation, which I guess is tied to what I was referring to earlier in I like certain things that I like to begin a foundation with are things that I have no emotional attachment to. So for me, that came in the form of just 1 kilo silver bars. So I just got a few of those. And so for a first timer, it could come in the form of something like a kangaroo, 1 ounce silver kangaroo. For you guys in the States, I imagine a lot of your dealers, it would be the American Silver Eagle. So something with a low premium, easily accessible, and highly liquid. So anything like that. We also have locally produced gold products. So generally the premium on those items are a little lower than the Perth Mint items. So start a foundation, and then from there, assess where you would like to take it.
So I guess the bottom line is know what you're wanting your investment or your stack to do for you.
Yeah,
determine
that's
that
right.
first, where you're trying to go with that, and then
Exactly.
that'll give you an idea of where to focus your attention as far as what to get into.
And I think uniquely precious metals and a lot of the clients that I deal with, you need to view it as a long-term project, I guess you would say.
Right.
And that's when dollar cost averaging comes into play, and not necessarily if you have a set budget. You could make a one-off acquisition and then walk away from it and let it sit. But I think a lot of people that end up engaged with the market and the industry are making regular purchases over the long term, because for me and for a lot of the clients that I deal with, it is a long-term proposition. And for a lot of people, you're dealing with generational wealth, people that are wanting to set up something for their children to pass on and have it as I guess like a safe haven for future generations as well. So
To kind of give them a head start financially.
You're looking at a much bigger picture than you generally look at with a lot of other investments.
That's good. Okay, well, that's all I have for you, Matt. It's been great. I love talking to you. Australia is a beautiful place. I want to visit there one day. I told you guys that. And if I ever do get down to, and I think you're in Melbourne.
Yes, that's right,
Am I
down
correct?
south.
Yeah, you're in Melbourne.
Yep.
So if I ever get to Melbourne, I will definitely visit Bullion Now and have a talk with you guys face to face. I'd love that.
We'll be happy to have you both over. It'd be great.
That's fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much, fellas. I've had fun. I appreciate that. And we're definitely going to have to do this again, Matt.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. It's always a pleasure speaking, and lovely to meet you, Silver 5150. And I'd love to do it again.
Okay, well, that's Matt from Bullion Now. We appreciate that. Tell the fellas down there that we said hi, and have a good day, mate.
You
Good
too.
day.
Thanks, boys.